Fala pessoal do SharpCast, sejam muito bem-vindos ao nosso 14º episódio. Hoje eu vou tocar o nosso programa aqui com um co-host diferente. Hoje o Divinão tá tirando uma folga aí. E hoje a gente vai estar aqui com o nosso querido amigo Sheck. Fala, Sheck, se apresenta aí pra galera, pra quem não te conhece aí, né?
Olá pessoal, boa noite, é um prazer estar aqui com vocês, com o Lucas, SharpCast, com um convidado muito especial que trazemos hoje. Há muitos membros da comunidade que já me conhecem, já tive a oportunidade de falar anteriormente para o povo brasileiro, para o público brasileiro. Estou ligado às apostas já há muitos anos e colaboro agora com o pessoal do SharpCast, fazendo aqui algum hosting com alguma... vai ser mais frequente, provavelmente vamos nos ver mais vezes. Vai ser uma experiência poder entrevistar aqui um convidado desta magnitude e estar contigo também aqui, Lucas. Obrigado.
Show de bola. Antes só da gente chamar nosso convidado aqui, a gente vai falar um pouquinho dos nossos patrocinadores. Vocês já devem estar vendo aqui na tela em algum lugar. A BetBra, vocês já sabiam que estava aqui com a gente, nossa parceira. Ela que funciona como um espelho da Pinnacle e também da Betfair. Ela é uma plataforma 2 em 1. E a gente já utiliza a BetBra aqui há muito tempo, nas nossas operações internas, para fazer tudo o que a gente faz de aposta aqui dentro da Bifront. Então a gente está contando com o apoio deles aqui para trazer esse podcast para vocês. E o legal de apostar lá é que você tem além de ter uma das melhores odds no mercado, você vai ter algumas funcionalidades diferentes, como planilhamento automático de bets e alguns meios de depósito bem facilitados, como o depósito por cripto. Então, tenho certeza que vocês vão curtir. Então, agora, sem mais delongas, a gente vai chamar nosso convidado, Berryhorse. Ele que é um apostador profissional e aficionado por Bitcoin. Ele ficou famoso aí na indústria das apostas por demonstrar um pensamento crítico muito acima da média e ser uma pessoa também muito analítica aí, com um dos melhores construtores de modelos aí do mundo. Então, bora lá. Hey, Barry. First of all, it's a pleasure to receive you here. Thank you for accepting our invite. So, just to begin, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, and how you start at this betting world.
Sure. Well, thank you first for inviting me, and an extra thank you to everybody listening to this who doesn't speak English. I'm amazed anybody wants to listen to me for 5 minutes, even if they do speak English, when there's 50,000 other people in the world looking for your attention. And so to pay so much attention that you're reading a translated script is crazy and a little humbling. So thank you. I'll go kind of fast, and you guys ask if anything's interesting that you want to talk more about. But the quickest background, I've been obsessed with a lot of things in my life. Probably the first thing in like a real serious way was particle physics, quantum mechanics. I worked on the hardware side of a quantum computing lab at Stanford when I was like 13 and was just very into that whole world for 4 years until I found computers. My high school had a computer science class my senior year that I was excited to take, and basically became really fascinated with how computers work and decided to study that in college, computer engineering and computer science. Throughout all of this, I played a lot of sports, mostly basketball, but loved watching them all as like my main hobby. And my first year of college started working at a NBA analytics company called Second Spectrum. I think NBA is decently popular in Brazil. Maybe they've heard of it, but anyways, started there, I guess, 2013, learned a lot. And at the same time was becoming way more aware of betting markets, and just saw a lot of what I was seeing in baseball as lending itself towards the work I was doing there, very left-brained physics, math, computer science-based pricing of baseball games. And maybe we'll end up talking about this a little more at some point, but especially in that time frame, like 2014 and most of like the late 2010s, doing anything, like in my opinion, doing anything remotely advanced statistically around baseball led itself to probably a bigger edge than I was even aware of at the time. Not even saying that I ran good and how good the baseball results were. I just think a lot of the stuff I wasn't even aware I was catching on to or pricing was stuff like maybe half a dozen or a dozen baseball teams were secretly doing. And so that led to like a pretty strong subset of baseball games. But anyways, from there, basically bet sports for a living since profitably since 2014. I graduated in 2017, so living on my own, paying for stuff since then.
I followed you since your first interactions on Twitter. I remember back then someone in the United States that moved the market. There is an interesting question because it's why baseball? Why did you start? You told us that you were playing basketball and you start modeling some completely other sports rather than the one you played. What's
Yeah, I don't know why I thought about things this way, because my bankroll was effectively nothing back then. Like I built my bankroll really hustling, scalping stuff early on. But like from the start, it was obvious to me what limits on different markets were. And so that led me just basically right away living in North America, pro NFL, NBA, MLB, basically. And in MLB, there's 2,500 games a year. In NFL, there's 250. So how many bets can you have in the others? It's less. The basketball was really interesting, but I had signed enough NDAs, to be honest, at the time, and I didn't know what data I could or shouldn't be using, and seemed like kind of a conflict of interest. And so kind of just never went down that rabbit hole. But there was one specific part of baseball I was really fascinated by in the 2014 Baseball World Series. And that led me to doing my best attempt at trying to price that statistically, like what that skill could be worth. I don't want to talk too specifically about it. It doesn't really matter in the sport anymore nowadays, but just in case it ends up mattering in the future. And yeah, it's just like very clean, like analytically, the sport, like there's a pitcher pitching to a hitter and it's decently clear, or at least much more clear, to isolate each player's skill from his teammates in baseball than any other sport. Like I'm jumping completely out of my range of expertise, even trying to talk about soccer, but just to use an analogy that probably more listeners might understand is I can say, I think Lionel Messi is worth 10 percentage points of winning percentage to his team when player X, Y, and Z are his teammates in this formation against this type of defense in this weather condition with this goalie, when the coach has them playing this style of football or soccer. And there's all kinds of different second and third order effects going on of all kinds of really complicated things, which in many ways is like a good thing markets wise to look at. If it's hard for you to do, that means probably hard for everybody else. But at least right off the bat for baseball, it just seemed really clear for me. If I can figure out how good each player is, then I can figure out how good each team is. And if I know how good each team is, then I know what probability they should win the game at. Again, without factoring in any very specific like matchup based adjustments, which in my opinion, are still very overrated, but nothing. But yeah, it just like a lot more analytically clean to me than the others.
Yeah. You have opened so many doors. I have so many questions. I'm not sure because, for instance, in soccer, I've spoken with many people that is trying to model the sport, and it's not very. I think it's not consensual because either you have the same problem that you have on NFL, for instance, because you have a very short data sample, because the season in soccer, it's like you have each team playing 40 games. Other guys say they have the problems with the decay rates when you are in live with the sport itself. So I think what you have said for baseball makes a lot of sense, because you have a segmented sport. You know, the teams will play those games. The games are corresponded like this. The players always do the same things. So I understand perfectly what you are saying.
And sorry to cut you off, but just in data to learn from, and this might be the case with soccer, again, I don't know, or football, but in baseball, there's pretty decently high quality data all the way back, honestly, before World War II and definitely since. Like RetroSheet is the name of the main data source a lot of people in baseball start with. And it's, of course, all this new age of StatCast and more interesting things with the tracking cameras is all 2016 and later. And, you know, there's some stuff with like pitch location, I think 2003 or 2004, but like there's pretty decent, not negligible amounts of data that go back for, you know, tens and hundreds of thousands of plate appearances to analyze on the sport in a pretty clean, organized way. So yeah, that was probably why the sport was first for me.
Well, no, that's a great answer, because I think most of us, we don't have the skills to model, and we tend to apply some qualitative nuances so we can better try to predict. I think when everybody starts, I think, and you went for another route, which I think is the correct one. But I must assume that there is no kind of space for any qualitative adjustments in your modeling. Or it's just a purely based model mathematically, or sometimes you need...
I for probably the first 5 years of my career is probably very hardcore left brain. The model says this, so bet it. I absolutely know what you mean by the question, but I just take language and words very serious and would like to be like very clear on the word model, especially when this is getting translated to a different language.
Yeah, okay.
And I know exactly what you mean, but just to be very clear and not to mystify this for anybody, like a model is just a map. And in this world, there's maps and territories, there's models and reality. And, you know, a predictive model is attempting to essentially predict the probabilities of something that hasn't yet happened in the future. And there's all sorts of ways to doing that. I know what you probably mean in the question is your modeling is all statistics, computer science based. And that was basically most of it at the start because it was easy. But at least for me, if I just play everything through to its logical conclusions, and I'm not saying this has already happened in 2024, because I don't think it has, but if you do, it seems likelier than not to me at some point, and this would probably trend this way over time, the market being the perfectly weighted average of everybody attempting to model who's in their own right is very intelligent, and the market selecting who's good at this and not by the real dollar wins and losses, and the survivors keep betting and they're obviously good at it. The perfectly weighted average of all those models, especially with AI and all these new things coming on the technology front, it almost seems like arrogant to me to think that like one individual could be so significantly better than that perfectly weighted average just because they're so brilliant at statistical analysis or modeling. And so like the last few years, I've leaned a lot more in towards like social engineering, relationships for information, or how you use the word qualitative. I don't even like breaking up subjective versus objective analysis and betting, like, you know, every subject is an object and every object is a subject. And, you know, whether somebody who doesn't even know what like regression analysis is winning on college basketball because he knows these coaching tendencies and he could barely have like a halfway competent conversation with anybody about the math of basketball, I still believe people like that can still beat these markets. You know, there's still objective things going on in their brain for them to arrive at all those conclusions. And so like, I don't even know the best way to word this, but I guess back to your question of, is the betting all modeling? I guess yes, like the model is my best attempt at creating a map of the future that doesn't exist yet. Statistical analysis is a bit part of that, but it's definitely not all of that. And yeah, definitely like the things that are difficult to quantify. I mean, in a sense, all of this is a varying degree of impossible to quantify. Like none of us are ever going to see identical sporting events That's part of
Yes.
what makes it fun and like unpriceable perfectly. And so, yeah, I lean into and focus on things that would be difficult to price because it's probably difficult for everybody else. And, sometimes that involves like really rigid mathematical background based on what I studied. And sometimes it's more social science and other stuff.
Yeah. It was a very complex question, and you answered it brilliantly, because I think nowadays we tend to listen for, I don't know, I'm going to call it experts, because your opinion on the market is a very special one, and I think we are going to ask you something about your market opinion on later on. But I have listened to a podcast that I'm not going to name it, but someone that I think is a very brilliant, one of the most brilliant minds in the industry, stating that VIG is a fear measure, and sometimes inside VIG there is value to be explored. And your opinion is pretty much similar, because you know that you cannot model everything, even if you would have some holy grail that would allow you to model perfectly everything. Probably the tendency would be that variance and it would probably bring you some defeats, some losses sometime, because inside randomness everything is not what you have predicted. You are predicting one event that is going to happen only one time, and you can be right about your assessment and prediction, but you can lose it, and because that random event will not happen again. So you will just need to lean on to another thing. And I think I'm going to ask, I'm not sure, Lucas, did you want to shoot some more?
Oh, I want to ask you a question a little bit different, but not so different. You talk a little bit about how data we have nowadays. It's available for everything. Let's put on this way, but we have AIs and stuff like that. And with all of these technologies, do you think we will still having opportunities to take money, to take advantage for the market, like let's think about some big leagues like NFL or English Premier League or stuff like that. With all this technology, do you think it's still possible to get advantage from this kind of market?
So I wouldn't consider myself even close to the best person in the world to answer this question, but, and like it's the same with most things, is most people usually overestimate what can be accomplished in a year and underestimate what can be accomplished in a decade. Like the world, even within betting specifically, looks so different than it did in 2014. Like podcasts like these didn't even really exist more than 5 or 10 having to do with sports since 2014. And so I would probably tend towards having the same opinion of AI, meaning people who are worried that like every line is going to be perfect tomorrow are overly paranoid, but people who blow it off are being incorrectly dismissive. I mean, it gets a little pie in the sky and like, what's even the point of thinking out this far in the future? But just to answer the question, just in my understanding of markets, like if this world ever did develop to a place where EPL, NFL, name whatever other sports you want, got so well priced that lines like barely even moved, I would suspect that in time for the market to even be competitive, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but probably in somewhat in the near future, maybe at some point humans evolve beyond this, but like it seemed like some amount of degeneracy and speculation will be interesting to people. And so I think there'll be an appetite or market to gamble, presumably forever. And I know the counter to what I'm about to say is that things have been minus 110 for a while, but if things truly got so perfect that they never moved, maybe things become, and I know maybe you do decimal odds, but like instead of 1.91, things start becoming 1.95 or 1.97 or eventually 1.99 because the prices are so good. And around there, it becomes hard for me to believe that, you know, fractions of a percent in win probability are going to be so perfectly reflected every time by the market. But again, projecting the efficiency of how efficient this gets relies a lot on how much money is able to be bet. And, you know, at least for now, there just is a ceiling to what a person can bet on games, which kind of precludes, there's unbelievably intelligent people doing all of this in basically every sport, but it precludes like the truly most open, like everybody in the world wanting to trade this, like bonds or US equities or, you know, whatever else. And so until that happens, I don't expect some like crazy quantum leap in efficiency, but I could be wrong. And I do think if it did happen, at least price sensitive people would just stop betting unless the market became more competitive to offer better prices. And around there probably would be more moves and room for advantages. But again, I don't think I'm the best person to answer that.
Okay, that was a good answer.
I'm just going to say something that leans on towards what you were saying, because my opinion, my general opinion on the markets is that they are not sharper than they were like a few years ago. Let's do it pre-COVID. Let's talk 2019, because the liquidity levels from all major bookies, the liquidity level on the market is lower. So I think if to a market to be efficient, one of the measures of the efficiency of the market is the liquidity of that on market. So
Totally.
nowadays we are seeing the bookies, and I'm not just talking about Pinnacle, but I'm talking major bookies on the Asian markets. They are retrieving from the professional markets, so the liquidity levels are getting lower, and I see many syndicates striving for liquidity. So probably this will lean us to opportunities again, because the markets will have less liquidity. Top tier syndicates have to be on other levels, other type of bookies. Maybe they are going to enter all tier 2 and tier 3s because they need that liquidity because of their turnovers. So I'm not exactly sure that we are more sharp than we were like 3 or 4 years ago. This is a question should be answered by the top CEOs of the bookies, but I think my opinion is pretty much like your own. So if we have less liquidity, the market should not be, on the theoretical point of view, more efficient, I think.
I would agree. And also, again, I'm sure you've had guests who've been doing this way longer than me, and maybe even yourselves, only like 10 years or so for me, but it's hard to provide like an objective measure of this, but anecdotally and intuitively, it feels like there's way more faking in markets now. In some ways there's less in some sports too, but maybe more of like even faking the close to hide stuff in places based on, you know, what the best accounts in the world might be taking. So agreed.
And I think also there is a lot of position taking nowadays, because you have much more third parties that are your liquidity is relied on third parties, and you are not pretty sure if that liquidity really enters the market or if it's a position from the third party itself. So actually the liquidity levels from some markets are pretty shady, because sometimes you say, oh, this is great, I got like 30K on display, great price, didn't move the market, fantastic. So I'm not sure if that's good, because if it doesn't move the market, sometimes you could have a position from somewhere, and then we are going to measure our model against their model, our efficiency level against theirs. So it's very complex. I think we need to quit this conversation now, because it's maybe we are not going to create more complex ideas than what they are already. I think this is on the betting. I'm not sure if Lucas wants to ask anything, but there is a topic that you are one of the most informative voices that I have heard, which is all the blockchain methodology and the Bitcoin enthusiast. You defend Bitcoin, and even after Bitcoin went a little bit down, you say that Bitcoin is the future. How do you assess Bitcoin in 10 years? Do you have an idea? Do you have a projection? Do you have your own model?
A projection for like the price, like exchange rate, or
no. I meant like more an evolution of itself inside either the betting world, the world itself, because
okay. So I mean, Bitcoin's entire purpose and the reason it has and is going to continue to change the world is that the world cannot change it. So I don't expect Bitcoin to change at all. It'll just be TikTok next block every 10 minutes roughly. And if crazy things happen with hash rate, then in 2 weeks we'll fix it. I would expect Bitcoin mining to continue to skyrocket. I think that's going to be a very lucrative business for the next decade. And with that, we'll drive cheaper energy for everybody in the world, basically. It's the energy buyer of last resort. I think that will have huge geopolitical impacts. So like a lot of the countries in the Middle East, just as an example, are incredibly wealthy today, basically because oil is their most prevalent, valuable natural resource for energy. And that transports decently well across time and space, at least compared to other options. Like you can store oil in a barrel for maybe 3 months before it becomes rancid or evaporates or is unusable. That allows you to basically ship it on shipping containers over most of the world. I wouldn't call it cheap at all, especially when compared to Bitcoin. But just as I guess opposite or an example of where Bitcoin mining plays into this is a place like Indonesia, as a random example, whose most prevalent natural resource for energy is geothermal. The issue being that it's not located anywhere near society or civilization. And so it's not like you can just go hook up a generator, plug in a battery, and then try and ship these batteries around the world because all the energy will dissipate and becomes unusable. But you can go plug in Bitcoin miners. You can then vacuum seal and store that energy in the form of Bitcoin, and then you can then cheaply and freely transport it anywhere in the world for billions of dollars for a $5 transaction fee in 30 minutes, which transports a lot easier than oil. And so I think that's going to have a crazy impact on the world, Bitcoin mining. I know you didn't really ask about that. Within sports betting, I think in every industry in life, it'll be more used. So it'll probably become more used in sports betting as well. That would be probably like my 10 years. If you want metrics, I would expect that the hash rate of Bitcoin, depending on Moore's law and a lot of other things, I would say the energy channeling of Bitcoin will probably grow with the log of the price. And so if Bitcoin continues at the rate of adoption, I would expect it to. Maybe that looks like 100 gigawatts of encrypted energy securing the network. It completely depends on hardware as to how many terahashes that is, or I guess by then it will be measuring in zettahashes. But yeah, I'm bullish.
You are bullish, but in all the other, for instance, it says that Bitcoin is the gold of the crypto, and for instance, other coins like LTC, Litecoin, or other, do you see the same Do you see the same bullish trends on those kind of assets, or just the Bitcoin will prevail in your opinion?
No, so I think everybody would understand much of why my answer is no if they took the time to research and study the dozens or hundreds of attempts at Bitcoin before Bitcoin that all failed categorically, to understand the uniqueness that Bitcoin is. And not to get really overly nerdy in computer science problems, but the chief solution that Bitcoin provides is to a problem called the Byzantine generals problem. Unless you want me to, I won't get super technical into what that is, but essentially, okay, yeah. So the Byzantine generals problem is pretend you have more than two generals of an army, the Byzantine army, who wants to attack a fortress, and they all need to coordinate and get on the same page about what time they're going. And if any, let's say there's 4 generals, and if any less than all 4 generals go attack at the same time, they're sure to lose the battle. Their only way to win is if all 4 go at the same time. So how, if the only communicators you have between the generals are soldiers on horses who might be traitors, might be corrupted, and sent incorrect messages by the village they're attacking, how, if you can't trust anybody, can these 4 generals come to consensus on what time they're going to attack tomorrow? And so Bitcoin solves this like incredibly elegantly. And the end result of this is a system where the world can reach consensus on who has and owns what without trusting anybody. And anything else is just like craft. So like what's basically happened is people have seen Bitcoin go and monetize itself from 0 to today at the time of recording, like I think a little over $1 trillion in market cap. And along this way, even significantly early on, basically around 2013, different versions of cryptos started to pop up, which is people saying, oh, wow, this Bitcoin thing monetized quick. Why don't we just take it and tweak a couple things and make it better, and we can do our own Bitcoin and change things, without realizing that they are becoming the oracle, which was all along the reason every attempt at solving the Byzantine generals problem failed. And so basically every altcoin since then is some oracle-led operation of basically committing securities fraud to try and ride the coattails of this blockchain buzzword, when the blockchain really has nothing to do with this. The blockchain is a really dumb, boring data structure that's existed since the 1970s. Lots of work from Ralph Merkle. You can look up Merkle trees if you're interested in this stuff. That's not the innovation here. The innovation here is the proof of work mining to solve the Byzantine generals problem so that everybody in the world can agree with who has what. And because of scarcity, which is like the whole other topic of Bitcoin, if you want to start talking about price, the price went up a lot. And yeah, basically people have invented whatever catchy, gimmicky, charlatanical reasons for starting alternatives to it would be, so that they can try and do the same thing, which is, you know, essentially every single other cryptocurrency. So am I bullish? I don't know. I mean, you know, markets trade irrationally for long periods of time, and obviously lots of them have, you know, traded at crazy, ridiculous levels, and most of them work on the Ponzi-nomics of, you know, like Ethereum, for example, had a 70% pre-mine, and so if all those coins, if I just start a coin called Berry Coin, and I'm the oracle of it, and I say there's 1 million units, and I find one friend who's an idiot to buy one for $1, now I can say that's $1 million asset because I have 999,999 Berry coins and it's sold for $1. So if I just dump mine on the market, I'd be a millionaire, when in reality, that's not how it works. And so that's why the crashes get so epic on all of these. And so will they almost surely trade for short periods of time and outperform Bitcoin? Most likely, yeah, but it's all recycled, basically scamming VC money that blew up pretty epically in the end of 2022 with FTX and all those people. But yeah, none of this really has anything to do with Bitcoin, and it's not terribly interesting to me. And I'm probably more certain in a negative future for cryptocurrencies than I am in a positive one. for Bitcoin, which is just measuring degrees of infinity, basically. But all of them are sure to fail over some time horizon. I would hope that is in the next 10 years, but it might be more in the next 100 years. So I don't know.
Even the stable ones, you mean? For those, you mean the stable ones that have?
You mean like stable coins?
Yeah.
So stable coins clearly provide a utility. Those are not like investable assets, but like, I'm obviously extremely anti fiat currency and central banking. And so, I'm any centrally planned money over any time period has died in the history of humanity. There's periods where, most of the great empires left it alone. So like the Roman Empire had the denarius, they left that pretty true to the value of the metal, until, the 9th generation derelict degen king of the throne started to clip the coins and debase the currency. They died, then took over the Byzantines. They probably lasted the longest. Constantine had their coin called the solidus that was fixed to gold for a pretty long time. And then Constantine the 9th or 11th or 13th, I forget, started debasing that, and that died. And so that's obviously happening with the US dollar. I don't know if that, again, will happen in 100 years, 200 years, 50 years, 10 years. But yeah, my opinion is that money is a competitive good, and, Bitcoin will outcompete all of them.
Okay. And there in the script we have something here about to ask you about the Bitcoin's ETFs. So your opinion, because you said, from all you said, and your reluctancy on the fiat currencies, meaning that the ETFs on Bitcoin would be a good thing in case of the allowance of and the acceptance of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I view it as, some very radical, like very toxic Bitcoin maximalists would say, like, getaway scammers, don't mess with us. As with all things, like, I'm sure this is sure to end up in some form of fractionally reserved Bitcoin. That's just anytime humans have controlled any of this, that's always how it ends. And so ETF Bitcoin is not Bitcoin. If that's your only access to Bitcoin, then I guess that's better than nothing. I'm a little bit more moderate, where I just view it as, thank you for the hundreds of millions of dollars in free advertising. I definitely think it helps the broader image of Bitcoin for most people in the world. But again, Bitcoin is Bitcoin. TikTok, next block, there's going to be a block in 10 minutes for the rest of time. I don't view this as any form of like regulatory capture or, kind of the opposite, to be honest. I view Bitcoin as like a Trojan horse, and the number up is so strong that it's attracted some of these legacy institutions into actually finally accepting it. So I think it will help price in the short term, but in the long term, it doesn't really matter, and will, become defunct over time.
Okay, you got me interested. I'm kind of, when we are bettors ourselves, we are kind of more risk averse than most of people think, and I'm kind of more stable coin myself, but but you got me interested. Can we get back? I think we need to revise our positions, Lucas.
Yeah, totally.
Because no, it's a very complex subject. We can take risk in our own betting, but we are adverse to risk to other types of matters, and sometimes, most of the times, we are not correct. Okay, Berryhorse, when you started this process, I'm going to call it a process, your evolution as a sports bettor, you came from a computer guy who loves sports, you enter the Twitter world. You shake the world. You shake with your tips and your bets. Everybody followed you, or many followed you. You move lines. These allow you to be known by large groups. But I guess with your process evolving, now you have many smaller groups also interested in your work or in partnerships. I'm not really sure if you want to address how would it be possible to work or to collaborate with you. I'm not even sure if you are open to collaborations, but if you want to give some thoughts on that.
On how people work together betting sports, or
how can people collaborate with
okay,
you,
yeah.
or if they want to? Okay.
Yeah, sure. So, when you win and continue to win, it becomes harder to actually bet at good prices. And so there are people in the world who are nearly infinitely better at betting games than I am. I don't think I'm good at betting at all. I think I'm significantly better at pricing games. And so, partnerships only make sense if, in the worst case, 1 + 1 is going to equal 2, but ideally 1 + 1 is going to equal 3. And so, my skill set, I believe, is being able to price games well. And so if there's, people out there who are able to bet and move the games quietly and would want to work together, then that would be valuable to me and could potentially make a scenario where we're both better off for having worked together, which would be interesting to me. So my Twitter is a good way to reach out, or Telegram. Berryhorse, I think Berryhorse, one word, is the Telegram, and Berryhorse_29 is the Twitter account.
Okay, that's you are now working mostly with golf, I think.
I mean, baseball is for sure my biggest focus. There's golf going on right now. That's the only thing I'm really pricing regularly, but even that is, the market's just really not that big in golf or college basketball, which is really how I built my bankroll of college basketball. But that's more of like a fun thing that I feel like I'm not really like costing myself tons of money by posting, and there's value towards having like a social profile in 2024. So I see value in doing that without like costing myself a ton. But baseball is definitely like a more interesting thing to me that is worth a lot more, I think.
Okay, that's after the podcast, we will for sure have some contacts for you, and just some thoughts. I think, I'm not sure, we are almost 1 hour now. Some thoughts on if you could give an advice to younger self. You are young, but what advice would you give?
I think it's kind of obvious, but it would be to, in the hardest moments I've had through all of this, to just accept that this is what hard feels like. Like, I think a lot of people probably reach some level of like burnout or fatigue or things where they complain about the industry. And I just hear that, and including past versions of myself. And like nowadays I hear that from people and like love it. Like, I love that I get to compete against you if you're going to be online complaining about how hard it is to win, how hard it is to bet, how hard it is to collect, and how hard all of this is. Because if this wasn't hard, then everybody would do it. And if everybody did it, then everybody would have what we want from this. And if everybody had what we want from this, we wouldn't want to have it. And so I just practice a lot of gratitude for how hard this is. And when I'm going through a hard time, whether that's the games losing, whether that's getting stiffed, or whether that's being incredibly difficult to bet and get good prices, accepting that this is what hard feels like. If you want to accomplish what you say you want to accomplish, of course you would have to go through hurdles like this. and enjoy it, I guess would probably be the advice.
And talking a little bit about more modeling, if I can put on this way. If someone wants to, I want to start making a mathematician model, which kind of advice you would give for this kind of people? Well, for where you begin?
Sure.
You would begin.
I really don't like saying the word should or telling what other people to do. Honestly, if somebody asked me that, my first question back to them would be why? Is this just like an interesting hobby to you and you want to become good at pricing games for the sake of being good at pricing games? Is it you want to turn like a borderline degenerate interest in gambling on games into at least break even or barely profitable? Or do you want to make a ton of money from this? And my answer would be different for each of those three options. The real answer is there is no silver bullet that I could explain in an hour-long podcast or however long this goes. And that even if there was one, I wouldn't give it to you, because not even just selfishly, I would want to keep it. The instant I did, everybody listening to this would cannibalize each other using that silver bullet. And so that doesn't exist. And so I could give you, a book called Statistical Rethinking, or this online YouTube class about TensorFlow, or, this blog about Bayesian statistics, but those three things are going to change every 7 months. And I think the answer to the question is way more important it's less about what you do or what I would recommend you start with, and just more about how much you do something. Again, back to the last answer about if the goal is to do really well in this, in a highly competitive market, of course it's going to be difficult. And so nobody should expect to just read 2 ebooks online, watch a YouTube course, and start making millions of dollars betting on sports. And it would be, I think most people, if they were really asking me that question, and I Berryhorse, I want to get better at mathematical modeling, how should I go about that? And I held a gun to their head and said, what, you try and answer that yourself. Maybe they wouldn't have the exact answer of me. They almost definitely wouldn't have the exact answer as me, but they probably wouldn't have that horrible of an answer of a place to start. And so I would just start there, see how much it fails, because you're going to fail for sure at the start, and adjust from there and learn. And, if you watched all of this and do nothing, then you've learned nothing. And if you try the first thing and it fails, and then you don't adjust and try a new thing, and you're not going to get the direction right on the first time. And it's going to be some squiggly line where you go like this and then realize you're going up in that direction. And I would just start that path, accept that it's going to be hard, be grateful that it's hard, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't want to be doing it and wouldn't be worth doing. And just do something for, 80 hours a week, every week for 10 to 20 years. It's the reality. I haven't seen anybody really last for a long time crushing at this level without having done that. And I just think I've learned way more from that than honestly anything I learned in school. I know I started off hot right away. I think that was a borderline fluke with how the market was at that time. And some of the things without even being aware I was pricing in, was something some teams were doing. And that came along with 17 other hidden awesome things they were doing. So I think I ran good on that front. And so I just wouldn't expect anybody to start today and win right away. And, like I said, work 80 to 100 hours a week every week for a decade would be my advice if you want to do really well. If you want to do a hobby, Statistical Rethinking is a good book. I would learn Python, learn what TensorFlow is. If you like baseball, you should look out the retro sheet data. Probably should learn R. There's certain practical things like that. But to be honest, most people could probably Google how do I do mathematical analysis on a computer, and some version of those things would come up, and there might even be better ones I don't know about.
Perfect.
Okay. Just a final note. I didn't expect to listen from someone related to machine learning and big data about Bayesian statistics. So you surprised me there because
my background in school was all machine learning. I've just like the problem of, do I bet the Chiefs or the 49ers in the Super Bowl? There's machine learning data-based analysis to say you could bet on either team. And like, it becomes a question. I'm purposely choosing a kind of silly example, but like, it's kind of like asking, should I get married or not? Like, I don't know. I can show you a ton of data that says I shouldn't. Half of them fail. It's really costly. It ruins some people's lives when you do that. And I can show you plenty of data that shows, you know, people's serotonin and dopamine, they live a much happier, fulfilling life. You know, there's plenty of reasons to do either. And so being married or relying to just like a number telling you what to do is always going to be up to the human itself, the agent making the decisions on, do I bet this? Because, you know, you can say you're blindly following a model, that's fine. But ultimately, if you're still betting for yourself, you're logging into the sports betting account, you're depositing your money, you're clicking Houston -120 and hitting submit yourself. Or if people are moving for you, you're logging into Telegram or Signal or whatever and typing Houston -120 for X amount of dollars and you hit send. A human being is doing that. And even if you automate that part, a human being still wrote the code to automate that part. And so like, I used to kind of use that as a crutch in losing streaks. Like, these aren't my games I'm pulling out of my ass or using my head to come up with. Like, it's the model I designed. But that was probably a really unhealthy relationship with this, where I feel much better served taking maximum responsibility and being in charge of all of this. So I'm fully aware of what a lot of the machine learning work I was doing in baseball prices a game at. And I also have plenty of just like a priori axiomatic beliefs about humans, sports, what certain things in the game could or couldn't be worth. And I update those beliefs daily or hourly, honestly, with new data that I'm presented with. And so there obviously is no right way to do this. And if there was, I wouldn't share it on a podcast. And so like, for somebody asking that question, I would look at all of these things and see what's interesting and see what fails the least, then iterate upon that. But yeah, I'm not like married to any single methodology of pricing a game.
Yeah, but sometimes we see in this industry, people they are reliant on one methodology. They are not so elastic like you, because you obviously have a very big theoretical background. You're just not using or watching the reality of that game from one scope. You have many eyes inside, and you are taking much advised opinion for sure. Berryhorse, for me, I think this was very interesting. We have a lot of things to talk about. I'm not sure if Lucas wants to let you go right now, but for me, I think
for me it was perfect. I think we cover all the questions we have for you, and was a pleasure to talk to you.
All right, thank you guys.
So I think you want to do another question? Check.
No. I'm perfect. We can cut, and then we will edit.
Então, galera, esse foi o final de mais um podcast nosso. Aqui foi um papo bem legal com o Berryhorse. Eu espero que vocês tenham gostado. Eu e o Cheque aqui curtimos bastante. Né, Cheque? Foi um papo bem da hora aí. Acho que ele também ficou bem animado aí com a nossa conversa.
Sim, foi e eu acho que nós temos que tirar muitas ilações e pensar um bocado naquilo que nós ouvimos hoje aqui, sobretudo para percebermos que as apostas, a modelização, ela é bem mais profunda do que aquilo que muitas vezes nós somos levados a acreditar. E para pormos os olhos numa pessoa que ele próprio diz que é um bom modelizador, acha que a valia dele está ali, mas que precisa de parceiros para poderem fazer a outra parte da equação por ele, mas que estamos a falar de uma pessoa que trabalha com modelos de machine learning, matemática bayesiana e outros padrões, e portanto não é fácil, não é para todos, e pronto,
Total.
e dá para pensar.
É isso. Então é isso, galera. Se vocês gostaram do nosso episódio aí, já se inscrevam, curtam esse vídeo aqui, que daqui 15 dias nós estaremos mais uma vez aqui. So, Barry, thank you again, and say goodbye for our public.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you.